This is episode 17 of the Home and Family Culture Podcast. I'm Jody Chafee, and in this episode, I interviewed Wendy Ulrich, a psychologist and founder of 16 Stones Center for Growth. Welcome to the Home and Family Culture Podcast, where I discuss how families can discover and design their collective vision, values, beliefs, and traditions that influence their family culture. The purpose of my podcast is to interview experts who can offer tips and tools to aid families in the process of developing their family culture, and also successful individuals whose success was influenced by their family culture. For more information or to subscribe, go to homeandfamilyculture.com, or you can find me on Instagram, Facebook, and Pinterest at Family Culture Podcast, and on Twitter at _Family Culture. You can tune in on my site or on the variety of podcast broadcasting apps like iTunes, Stitcher, Podbean, TuneIn Radio, and even on YouTube. Just search Home and Family Culture with the ampersand between home and family culture. Please remember to like, comment, share, and rate on whatever medium you choose. I would love to hear from you. Wendy Ulrich, PhD, MBA, has been a practicing psychologist for over 20 years and is the co-author with Dave Ulrich of the Wall Street Journal bestseller, The Why of Work: How Great Leaders Build Abundant Organizations That Win, 2010 McGraw-Hill, as well as other books on personal change, including Forgiving Ourselves, Getting Back Up When We Let Ourselves Down, and Weakness is Not Sin, The Liberating Distinction That Awakens Our Strengths. She is the founder of 16 Stones Center for Growth, providing seminar retreats on personal growth and creating an abundant life. And she is a learning partner with the RBL Group. She has taught psychology at Brigham Young University and is a fellow and former president of the Association of Mormon Counselors and Psychotherapists. So welcome, Wendy Ulrich. Thank you so much for being willing to be on my show. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what inspired the 16 Stones Center for Growth.
I'm a psychologist by training and have been interested in how people grow and find more joy in their lives for a long time. I'm very interested in healing, but also in helping us all to sort of fulfill our personal mission in life and move forward in a positive way. It's not enough to heal, as important as that is. We want to thrive. Yeah. So 16 Stones is both of those things. It's basically a small group format. I only take about 5 people at a time. We spend the day together talking about issues like forgiveness, or closer to God, or developing better relationships, or a variety of topics. So it's been a lot of fun. We have great conversations and we learn a lot together.
That's wonderful. So this topic of forgiveness that we wanted to talk about is so inspiring. And when I was thinking about this idea of how forgiveness is important to our family culture, the words that came to my mind were meekness and humility, faith, and also vulnerability and trust. That if you have all of those things in your family culture, then you can really thrive. And I saw that you wrote 2 books about forgiveness. This Forgiving Ourselves and Getting Back Up When We Let Ourselves Down. And, well, I guess the weakness is not sin. It's not necessarily about forgiveness, but it kind of is too. Can you tell us some more inspiration behind those books too?
Yeah, I did Forgiving Ourselves because I had so many clients who struggled with this, and I think I struggle with it as well. I think it's a common thing for us to feel like we should forgive other people, but a lot of times we're kind of shaming with ourselves and have a hard time letting go of our own mistakes and our own past. So I was trying with the book to give people some ways of applying some of the good principles in psychology from forgiving others to how we can forgive ourselves and where are some of the places that we get stuck. It's not just easy as flipping a switch to forgive others or to forgive ourselves. Sometimes there's a process involved. We have to do more than just choose. We have to sort of figure out what's stopping us from choosing to be forgiving. And so that was where the idea of weakness not being sin became obvious to me that when we think everything we do wrong is a sin, it's really hard to forgive ourselves because we feel like we don't even have a right to. It's like only God gets to forgive sin. You don't get to forgive your sins. And we can feel like, if the idea behind sin is you renounce a sin and you never do it again, well, we have all kinds of things that we do over and over and over again, even though we tried not to. So I was trying to figure out the difference between those things and realize that there is a whole category of stuff in our lives that really isn't a deliberate choice to be mean or to be rebellious or to be disobedient to God or to act in ways that are against our own values. They're just the normal weaknesses that go with being human. We have predispositions of all kinds. We have emotions of all kinds. We get overloaded. We have physical health problems, mental health problems. We get taught stuff that isn't true, that isn't helpful, that we believe, because we were 3 when we taught it is the way life works. And we may not be conscious of those things. So we have all these challenges that we are dealing with that we're trying to sort of grow in and learn about and get better at. But if we see them as a sin, we have a hard time letting them go. If we see them as a weakness, then we can begin to realize, okay, this isn't something I just change my mind about and stop. I'm going to have to learn a process here. I'm going to have to be patient. I'm going to have to practice. I'm going to have to get help. I'm going to have to learn about this over a long period of time.
I really love that because that's something that I'm learning right now in my life. I kind of been calling myself lately a recovering perfectionist,
Yeah.
And that's, I think that those go hand in hand, that this weaknesses is not a sin or not, just saying I'm enough is good, is a really healthy way to look at things. And you're right. It's totally a process. You can't just wake up one morning, and expect everything is going to be okay or perfect or right. Yeah. That's one of the things that
including in ourselves.
Yeah. Well, it's like when I struggle with this perfectionist idea, it's like if I wake up too late, I've already started the day off on the wrong foot,
Right.
And it's hard to forgive myself, like you say, to just move on and say, it's okay. So I woke up a little bit late. I'm going to start from right now
and go forward.
Go forward. And
if I want to take a few minutes to say, well, let's look at that situation. Why did I get up late? Because I went to bed too late, because I was trying to do things for too long last night, or because I couldn't sleep because I got up with my child. Well, then I can say, okay, if I stayed up too late last night doing stupid things, let me change that. If I got up with my child and was tired in the middle of the night, that's living my values. And that's what is most important to me. So of course I'm going to sleep in a little bit, and that's okay.
Yeah. Allow yourself some grace that it's okay.
Yes.
And also tell us more about this idea that it's a process. They say, like, when we talk about exercising our faith or, that blessings come after the trial of our faith, things like that. How can you describe how forgiveness is like a process and what you can do to forgive in that process?
Well, I'm grateful for the idea that we don't give somebody just once. We have to forgive 70 times 7. And that doesn't necessarily mean because they do 70 times 7 things wrong. Sometimes it's because on one thing that's been so painful in our lives that we're going to be triggered by that pain over and over in our lives. And we may have to forgive the same offense over and over in our lives because it continues to impact us. It continues to affect the way that our lives go forward. If somebody has hit me in a car accident that I think was their fault because they were drunk when they did it, and I'm a paraplegic as a result of that experience, it may not be enough to just say, well, they were weak, they blew it. Every time I find myself dealing with a new aspect of my disability as a result of what happened, I may have to go back and say, I have to let go. I have to move on. There's nothing I can do about the past, so let's move forward. One of my favorite expressions from a woman named Beverly Flanagan, who writes about forgiveness, is that forgiveness means letting go of giving up hope of ever having a better past. And there's something really profound about that, because we don't think we're hoping to have a better past. We know that that's not logically possible, but in some ways that is kind of what we're hoping for. We're kind of imagining that the only way we're going to be able to move forward and be happy again is if we could go back and undo what's already happened, what someone else has already done to hurt us, or what we've already done wrong, whatever it may be. So it's an interesting thing that forgiveness, really forgiving someone, is what gives us the opportunity to live in the present. Yeah. And to go forward into the future rather than being stuck in the past, which is a period of time that we cannot change and we cannot undo.
I love that. That's very personal to me right now, because I'm trying to. My husband and I are working through some things from like job crisis things and, choices with our education or, whatever it is. And we're just like, oh, I wish we could go back and do X, Y, and Z and fix this. And that's just not possible. You have to, like you say, live in the present and say, what can I do going forward?
Yeah. One of the best definitions of mental health I ever heard was that mental health is the ability to respond to what really is from our deepest values. And that means we have to start by recognizing what really is. What really is what has happened, and we cannot change that. But we can decide, what are my deepest values about this particular problem now that I am faced with, and how do I want to go forward? How can I learn from the past? Certainly. And let me take the time to do that. If I find myself in a situation that I think I could have done something differently about, if I've known then what I know now, then I can spend some time talking and writing and thinking about, what do I know now that I will take forward with me? Yeah. But then it's time to let go of things I can't change.
And that's the irony of it all, is that if I could go back and do over again, knowing what I know now, but how would I know now unless I've gone through the things that I've gone through? And so that can also maybe inspire a little bit of gratitude for the experiences that you've had. And as you're talking about being present, that reminds me a lot about meditation and mindfulness and things like that. Does that ever come into your practice with talking about forgiveness?
That's very helpful to a lot of people, because it trains our minds in sort of it trains our minds in seeing what we're thinking, in taking a step back from it, in watching the emotions go past without having to join them. And that can be draining for all of us as we're trying to learn to live in the present.
And when I think about that too, it reminds me of the importance of the choices that we have then, and on how when we observe those feelings coming in front of us, we don't have to join them. We have that choice. There's a space between what's triggering the emotion and our reaction, and that's where our choice comes in. And
absolutely, sounds like you have some experience with that. What's been your experience, Wendy?
Yeah, well, when you have little children, there's and even I'm sure with adult children, grown-up children and things, teenagers, I haven't experienced quite yet, but I definitely, little children can trigger things inside of you that you just go, oh, that really irks me. But to take it out on these innocent children, it's not right, because they don't understand. And so whatever is going on is just inside of me. It's not something that they're doing. It's what I interpret the situation is going on with what they're doing. And so I have to pause and recognize, okay, what am I feeling? And how do I react to it? And the interesting thing too is that inside of all of us, like you talked about, there is that opposition that we want to be one thing, but we struggle with it. And because we're a natural man, and then at the same time we have the Spirit of God, both battling inside of us at the same time. And it's like, well, if I give in to the natural man, is that weakness or is it sin? And so we have to, what is the interpretation there? But at the same time, like when we can just go, you know what, it's okay, or I forgive, I need to repent or forgive. We try to find the ability to more consistently respond to the Spirit of God side of us. And that's where the choices come in. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
I understand that Fiona and Terrell Givens have a new book out I have not read yet, but someone was telling me that one of the points they make is that this idea of a natural man is found in the Bible as well. And the more historical understanding of that term is not, it doesn't mean just how we're born, that it means an acquired kind of worldliness that we acquire from living in this world. We are not battling with our own selves as much as we are battling with the world and with the predispositions that we may have picked up from an early age, how the world sees things. Yeah. But our natural state is innocent before God. And so, as you say, our little children they're just responding to their bodies and to the world around them. And I think sometimes we can be helped when we see those other people in our lives as the barbells that we have to lift in order to acquire the characteristics that we want to learn and in order to live the values that we cherish and we believe in with more integrity and with more grace in more and more challenging circumstances. If you want to get stronger, we were talking earlier about our mutual friend, Paul Schulte, but if we want to get stronger, as he has, you don't do that by just only picking up the easy problems in life or the easy weights on
doing it once and going, oh, that was too hard.
You get stronger and you get muscle by carrying weight that's heavier and heavier. And if you want to play the game the way he does, that's what we have to do. We're here to learn to play the game, whatever our game is in life, as best we can, and to get stronger and stronger at it, so that whatever the circumstances are that we're in, we can continually grow in our ability to respond to them from our deepest values.
That's beautiful. So in the context of family culture and the way that, the feelings in our home as we come into our home and we want to feel safe, we want to feel that we can be vulnerable and open about what's going on in our lives and these struggles that we're having. How does that repentance, forgiveness, apologies, how does that work in your family in order to cultivate that sense of vulnerability and safety?
Well, it's a funny thing that you put those two words together. I think you're absolutely right to do that. But we don't think of being vulnerable as being safe. We think of being safe as being invulnerable and being beyond vulnerability. So we're trying, as you say, to learn to do both of those things at the same time, which is kind of a paradox that we struggle with. Yeah. But it is when other people are willing to be vulnerable with us and to be open, to be honest, that we feel safe. I remember a couple I worked with years ago. The husband had some issues with pornography. And of course, it had been a very difficult thing in their marriage because of the degree to which he was involved. He was really trying to overcome that tendency, work with it, and to be responsible for it. But he knew that it was painful for his wife. And so he would when he would find himself tempted, or he would maybe slip up a little bit, he would want to hide it from her because he didn't want her to feel unsafe. But she knew that this was an ongoing problem in people's lives. She knew it wasn't something people just turn a switch on. She knew it was going to take time and practice. She wanted to help him. She felt like the real genuine connection between them was going to be his best defense against the struggle and the temptation that he was dealing with. Wow. But she didn't know how to be present with him in that struggle unless she knew he was having it. Mm-hmm. So he was trying to hide his temptations. He was trying to hide from her the times when he was struggling. And what she said really made her feel safe was when he was willing to say, I am struggling, so that she could join him and help him, and she could believe him. The trust wasn't developed by him hiding from her that he was having a hard time, which he thought was what she needed to feel safe. The trust was developed as he was willing to be vulnerable with her and admit he needed help or that he was having a hard time and let her help him. And that's where the trust really grows in relationships, is when we're open with each other rather than hiding.
So being vulnerable and open, that can strengthen your family. Because you feel more safe because you're able to express yourself, develop yourself, and then have that support and identity because you have that narrative going on of safety and compassion. Yeah.
Right.
And I like this word. I recently was reading a book about your goals, and it's called The 12-Week Year. And it talked about accountability, not not defined as consequences, but as ownership. And that when you have accountability for what's going on, then you take ownership of what's happening in your life or whatever it is that you're responsible for. And so like with this story about the couple, that, when he being accountable doesn't necessarily mean, well, he needs to be punished for what he was doing, but that he needs to just take ownership for it and be honest and open, and that allows for the healing and the growth when he says, yes, this is my problem, this is what I'm dealing with, and that allows him to claim it in order to work on himself in order to heal. Would you say that that's true?
Yeah, certainly.
I just like that term. And understanding that accountability doesn't mean, okay, you're in trouble because you're the one that's responsible or you're accountable. It means I just own it. I just take this and it's mine, and I'm gonna, whatever that means, whatever it is that I have to do to either correct the situation or just be responsible for it.
I can share a story along those lines. When I have a son who was a very big boy. He came into this world at 13 pounds. And
wow. I didn't realize he was heavy.
He could throw a punch, from the time he was pretty young. That was not that he was an aggressive kid as a rule, but he's a normal child. He'd get frustrated. And when he did, he could just decide to hit somebody and could do some damage. And we had done a lot of work, trying to figure out what's the best way to help him correct that behavior. We talked to him. We tried rewards and consequences and all kinds of things. And he just wasn't controlling that part of his life very well. So I talked to a colleague about it and said, what do I do? And he said, well, where did he learn to hit? And I said, I don't know. We don't hit our children. I mean, I don't know. What are you talking about? And he said, well, did you spank him when he was little? Mm-hmm. And I really had to stop and pause, because I thought, well, yeah, I did sometimes. I'd get frustrated and I'd get angry. I didn't always handle it very well. I don't think I had really been someone who was inclined to spank with my daughters, but he had a different personality and a different set of hormones. And so did I, maybe, I don't know, but I did sometimes spank him. And so I had said, yeah, I guess I did. And he said, well, then there's your problem. And I said, well, what do I do about that now? I haven't spanked him since he was 3, and I don't think he even remembers that I spanked him. And he said, well, I don't know. You'll have to figure it out. So I thought about it, and I thought, well, I guess, the accountable thing to do, as you, in the words you were using, would be to apologize, to take responsibility for this. And I was a little embarrassed to do that. He was now 8 or 9 years old, probably, and I didn't really want to take ownership for something that I felt like I had already corrected, and it was way old. I'm sure he didn't even remember, and what was the point of bringing this up? And all of that stuff was going through my head. But eventually, I sort of said to myself, your values are, when you make a mistake, you apologize for it, mm-hmm. and it's never too late to do that. So let's get on with the program here.
Yeah.
So I went in one night and I asked if I could talk to him, and he cheerfully said, sure, Mom, go, what's up? And I said, well, I wondered if you thought about or remember that when you were a little kid, and I'm kind of hemming and hawing, that you got spanked sometimes. And he got really serious and sullen really fast. And he said, yeah. And I said, I thought, oh, well, I guess he hasn't forgotten after all. Now what do I do? And so just out of curiosity, I said, well, Mike, so how often do you remember being spanked? And he said, every day. And I thought, oh boy, I didn't know what to make of that. And I didn't do a very good job with this apology, but I was trying to kind of think, well, I know I didn't spank him every day, but I don't want to deny his reality. That's not where we start. We start with empathy for the other person's behavior, the other person's feelings, and we start there. And so I said, Mike, I'm really sorry. I'm really, really sorry that it feels that way. I do want you to know that you didn't get spanked every day, but I can hear that it feels like you did, and that was really hurtful to you, and that you didn't like it, and you're not, that's not a ridiculous thing. I wouldn't like it either. And I was wrong. I made a mistake. I didn't handle that well. I wish I had found a better way to help you learn some of the things we were trying to learn together. And I hope you can forgive me. I really am sorry. And he didn't say anything more. He just laid there in his bed, and I didn't know what else to do. I wasn't really experienced with this process, And so I just kind of said, well, if you want to talk about this again, I would be happy to, but thank you for listening to me. And I'm really sorry that I didn't handle that better. And I hope we can move on. And that was the end of the conversation. I just kind of slunk out of his room feeling kind of silly, but it was really curious to me that after a couple of weeks, I began to notice that he had we had had no further incidents with him hitting anybody. And as a matter of fact, as far as I know, I don't think my son's ever hit another person as long as he's lived. He's got 4 children of his own now, and his wife came to me when they started having kids and said, I understand that you didn't spank in your family, so how did you raise your children? And I thought,
wow. He's completely forgiven that.
As time went on, he completely forgot that he had ever been spanked. He brought this up with many years later, and he didn't remember that he'd been spanked. It was gone. It was finished. It was done with. And yet at the same time, isn't that my son had a hitting problem. In our family, at least, his mom had a hitting problem, and it was stuck in his brain. And I don't know that that's universally true. And I'm not saying there might never, there's never a time to spank a child. Maybe there is. That's not the point I'm trying to make. But the point is that apologizing really can change things in a positive way and change the feeling in a home, and can sometimes change people's behavior and change even our memory of how the past worked.
Well, and that's something that I'm trying to address with this podcast, is that, that our behaviors are all just a manifestation of our beliefs. And that when you want to change the behaviors you need to address the beliefs behind the behaviors and find out what they are, evaluate, change, and work at the beliefs. And because everything is created first mentally and then physically. And so when you work at those beliefs, then the behaviors change. And that's what's manifest. And so
I guess I would take a little bit of issue with that. I think most of what we experience in our life, I would totally agree with. We create an image in our minds of what something means, and we respond what that meaning is to us, whether or not it's real, and then we put that behavior in place. But there are realities in people's lives that predate our thoughts about them. Children have a physical reality of being hungry or of being hurt, or we have a physical reality of being ill or being exhausted or whatever it might be, that can influence the way we think about things and can influence the thoughts that we have.
Yes.
And those physical realities sometimes come first, and we need to be sometimes a little bit more compassionate, perhaps, with ourselves and with others about what our own our bodies are doing to our brains, and not just the other way around.
Thank you for clarifying that. I appreciate that. That's a really good point. Thank you. Well, I think I really loved this discussion. I think that it's really important that we remember that we can forgive, and that it influences the feelings that we have in our home, and that apologies can really change the situation in our homes.
A couple of quick pointers on this.
Yeah.
When you want to apologize, it really helps not to become a martyr about it. Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm a fair mother. You must be really angry with me because I'm always messing this up. It's not helpful. That's making the discussion about us and not about the person that we've hurt.
Okay.
But when we can just calmly and honestly say, I think I really messed up about this, or I can see that this has really hurt you. And when we can own our own accountability for something and acknowledge the feelings of the other person, then we're in the ground of an effective apology that says, even if we don't feel we did anything wrong, to say, I can see this really hurt you, and I need to understand why and see how we can fix that and how we can manage this kind of situation better in the future. We can at least do that. And if we know we did something wrong, if we violated our own values in the situation, we can certainly say, I really had hoped that I would be able to handle this differently, or this is really not my intention. And acting in this way, or I'm really trying to work on this, but what can I do to make it up to you? What can we do the next time so this doesn't happen again? Is there more? This is what I plan to do. Is there more that would be helpful? Are all questions that help sort of acknowledge we've got responsibility in this for another person's feelings being hurt that we can work on, even if it wasn't our intention to be hurtful.
Yeah.
So that can be helpful.
So
apologizing.
Another question that triggered another question in me is, how do you forgive somebody then who doesn't feel like they did anything wrong?
Yeah, that's one of those tricky things where that idea of weakness versus sin can come into play. Because if we're seeing something as a sin, as in they violated the normal understanding that everybody should have of what's right and wrong, then of course we're going to be angry. If they're looking at it and saying, A, I don't think that was wrong, or B, that was just a weakness that I'm struggling with, but it wasn't an intentional or rebellious violation of values, then we're going to have some difficulties. If we can learn to see other people as weak as we are sometimes, that they're struggling with their weaknesses and we're struggling with ours, sometimes that helps us get out of this idea that did something that everyone should know is a violation of human basic ethics. We all have different ideas about what matters and what doesn't. And sometimes the things that we get really upset about are, my husband doesn't put his socks away. Well, okay, this is not a human value that everyone should know. This is differences in how people manage day-to-day life.
Yeah.
It can bug, and it may go deeper to he doesn't care about my feelings, but the chances are that that's not what he's thinking when he puts his socks on the floor is, oh, my wife really hates this, but I don't care. He's just not thinking of it because he hasn't been sensitized to that issue the same way that you have. So we need a lot of compassion and a lot of patience with each other and with ourselves as we're trying to learn to get along with people who see the world inherently differently than how we do. But that's not necessarily a sin. Sometimes it's just our human weaknesses of how we've been raised differently, how we approach the world differently.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you. So Wendy, tell us one more time, or tell us where we can find your books and any services that you have available.
16 Stones Center for Growth is 16stones.net on the internet, and a fun opportunity. I don't do very many of these seminars. They don't come up very often, so they're just kind of a fun thing. But the books are more widely available on Amazon.com. Certainly you can get any of my books, Forgive Yourselves, Habits of Happiness, Weakness is Not Sin. These are some of the things I've been working on.
Awesome. I'll make sure to have those links in my show notes so that my audience can find you and learn more. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you, Jody.
I love talking to people who have so much experience and insight. I really enjoy talking with Wendy, and I think this is a topic that I could talk about for days. I can't wait to read her books and check out some of the other books she talked about in this episode. You can find links to all these references in my show notes at homeandfamilyculture.com. I would love to hear your thoughts about this topic in your comments, or you can connect with me on social media at Family Culture Podcast on Facebook and Instagram, and at _Family Culture on Twitter. Thank you again for listening. Please rate and share. I love your feedback.